Hi, today we had our lesson called Mini Unit number 2, and it is about reading in history. And in particular, in my world history class, this is something that's really important because students will be assigned reading 3 to 4 nights a week, and the page amount will be between 3 and 5 pages. So I think it's really important to give them some steps and some strategies so that they can build their comprehension and reading level. Now I'm going to be bouncing back and forth between this page, which gives you a brief summary of what I'm going to talk about. I'll be mentioning certain steps here that I did not write in all of the Roman numerals, but I do have some more detail down here. So it's kind of for students who missed class, that if they can write down the steps that I mentioned through this video, and then I'll bounce back to the actual textbook so that you'd be able to see what some of the ideas that I'm explaining look like. So let's begin. The first Roman numeral here, the first main idea when we're working on reading for history, is to preview the chapters before you actually read the text. Now there's about 4 steps that I'd like to go over with this section. So I'm going to refer to the text now. When I say to preview the chapter, this is chapter 1. This is the chapter 1 opening page. So the first step is actually to read the title. Now, many students, they just skip right past the title and they go right into the basic text and they start reading there. But I think it's really important to read the title. For example, the peopling of the world. This gives us a clue as to what this chapter is going to cover. It also tells us the time span in which this chapter will cover, which is prehistory, meaning before the invention of writing. That's a very long time ago, all the way up to 2500 BC. So it tells us exactly the scope and frame of what we're going to be focusing on. The second step that I would suggest for students is the book does a great job of helping guide you through this, previewing the main ideas. This is really important because it gets us primed and ready for what are the big picture topics that we need to understand from chapter 1. As I scroll down, I will inform the third step is that each chapter page starter will have a timeline. It's very important for students in a world history class or an AP world history class to be able to put major events into chronological order. So these timelines at the beginning of the chapters are useful for end of chapter study, unit exams, and of course for the AP exam, understanding events that happened before this or after that or in relation to this. Really, the idea that you want to take a look at a timeline is to understand cause and effect and how certain events are related to previous events or future events. Now, the fourth and final step in previewing the chapter is to always study the chapter opening map. This map gives us a little bit of understanding of geographic reference and place in which we are learning. Now, this chapter is about human origins. We know through study of ancient artifacts and bones and fossils and sort of things of that nature that human life began in Africa, here in the central portion of Africa, and then people then migrated outward into Europe, into Asia, and elsewhere. So just by taking a quick preview of the chapter, we can get a great understanding, a basic understanding of some of the key ideas that will be covered. Okay. This is the start of a section. So your book is divided up into chapters and into sections. This is chapter 1, section 1. I'll take you back to the lesson to talk about what are some of the steps that we need to understand there. Roman numeral 2 says preview sections before you read. So before you jump into reading the text, I think it's really important and valid to preview the section. And let me explain by using the example of the book how I would expect my students to do that. Obviously, the first step would be to read the section title, which in this case is Human Origins in Africa. That's going to give us a clue as to what this section of the book is about. It's about how life began in Africa. The second step would be to utilize and read the orange boxes here at the top of the section page. They are the main idea, which gives us once again the big picture of this specific section. The why it matters now, which connects things that we're learning about in the past to the present and why it's important for us to study it, and a list and a host of terms and key names that we will need to be acquainted with to truly understand the message of the section. The third stage or third step in previewing the section would be to reading the setting the stage introductory paragraph. I like to compare this to, if you're writing an essay, your introductory paragraph would be akin to setting the stage in the textbook. Probably the most important part of today's lesson would be Roman numeral 3, right here, to use active reading strategies as you read. So what we talked about in Roman numeral 1 and Roman numeral 2 are things that you need to do before you read. These are strategies that you would utilize while you're actually reading the assigned text. I have two basic steps that I'd like to talk about, and I will refer to the text for the first one as an example. My first active reading strategy that I would like my students to deploy would be the main idea question box in your textbook margin. Now, I'm going to go to the textbook, and here's the section opener. You can see that your textbook is broken up into large red subheadings, smaller black subtitles, and blue key terms inside of the basic text. Now, as you read, you will find many things in the margins and insert pages like this one here about culture that will help you get a deeper understanding of the section. As you continue to read, there you will find main idea questions in the margin. These questions would be great active reading strategies for you to self-examine your comprehension. All you need to do is look at the question and see if you can answer it. If your answer is yes, if you know the answer and you know it well, then feel free to move on. If you are not sure, or if you're a little spacey on the answer to the question, then you probably didn't read close enough, didn't read well enough. You'll need to go back and read again. My second piece of advice is called the paragraph check. Now, this is an active reading strategy that I use in my daily life, and I think it's really effective for the vast majority of my students. I want to give you a scenario here as to how this works. How many of you have been assigned a 10-page assignment in reading, and you start reading, you read the first 5 pages, and you kind of catch yourself when you say, oh boy, I don't remember anything that I just read. It happens to me personally all the time. One of the things is that we lose our focus and we're thinking about something else. We're not being here now. We're not focusing on the task at hand. And so one of the strategies that I would suggest is the paragraph check. And the way that that works is when you read a paragraph, simply ask yourself this basic question. Do I understand what I just read in the paragraph above? If your answer to that is yes, if you fully understand what that paragraph was about, maybe you could summarize that paragraph in your mind, then you can move on and read the next paragraph. If you're struggling to come up with anything from that paragraph, then you need to go back and read again. The great thing about the paragraph check is it's going to save you a lot of time, because by doing the paragraph check, you will avoid getting 5 pages in and then have to go back and reread. The paragraph check is an imperative active reading strategy. Finally, for the purposes of today's lesson, at the end of a section, when you're done reading, you want to review and summarize what you've read. Here's my basic suggestion in step number 1 to do that. Utilize your textbook. It has an end of section review question / assessment section there that you can utilize. I'm going to show you that so you can get a visual example. So we're going to continue reading the section. You see that there's a lot of insert boxes. Here's another main idea question. And then when you get to the last page of the section, which is right here on page 11, you'll find the section 1 assessment. I will never assign this for points, but I suggest when you finish reading a homework assignment, let's say, to look at the main idea questions. In section 1, there's only 3. Sometimes there's 4, sometimes there's 5. What you'll want to do here is you want to see if you can answer those in your head. You don't have to write them down. Just see if you feel comfortable with these questions and could you answer them if you had to. If you can do that, you're good to go. You can move on to your next task. your next class assignment, or have some free time. If you're a little spacey or you don't know the answers to these questions, you probably didn't read well enough, you probably didn't practice the paragraph check, you'll need to return to the text, either skim through or, unfortunately, reread. That is the end of Reading Strategy Mini Unit Lesson number 2. Thank you.